Hello, we're still in the wacky world of change management. Managing change. There's a guy named Kurt, he's German, living. He used to have like 2 dots on his E. It's like a ooh sound. I'm gonna work in the dark a little bit today. So the last class we looked at some of the reasons for resistance to change, and there's different kinds of resistance. There's the management resistance to market forces and external factors that are influencing the business, and then there are internal resistances to the change that come from the dislocation of employees and staff and the issues with how the communication of the change is implemented, for example. So the theory of change management, before that psychotic guy, John Connor, there was another guy, this guy, Kurt Leuven. He realized, we'll talk about this when we talk about motivation theory, but we already know Maslow a little, is that there was an understanding after the Second World War that employees are motivated by different things and not everyone is the same, and money is not the only thing that people are thinking about. There's other motivations. So at this time there was a lot of theories, a lot of new ideas about how to meet that employees to, there was actually a full lot in the US, most of these theories, but there was an increase in employment. The economic growth was incredible after the Second World War, so there was some competition for staff, and so therefore it was harder to keep good staff, so we wanted to keep them, and we also need to manage them better and to foster change in a way that builds confidence. So it was the 1950s that this guy came up with his theories and research about change theory, and we'll introduce him on page 70 in your book, page 70, chapter 11. Preparing people for change. For change to be successful, employees must be prepared for it. And Leuven, he thought that it was important that you even talk, before you try to even plan the change, that you talk about the situation with the people who are going to be involved in the change. This is a common criticism of politicians that do not sell their policies. So in this case, they're using an example from politics when they raise taxes, but they don't explain why the taxes are going up, or make some new law, but they don't explain how the law is supposed to be implemented or how that's going to affect people. I guess a good example would be like the helmet law in Vietnam. It took them, this was 2009, I guess, 2008, 2009. They tried 3 times to get the helmet law going, and I think they learned something about to fight Corona from this helmet law campaign. But the first 2 times they tried to just say, okay, here's the law, wear a helmet. People were like, no, my hair is more important than a helmet. Hair gel was selling well. It was very important what they looked like. People were showing off. They had their SH, what were they riding back then? The symbol, like the Atbme, it's like an at symbol. I forget what that's called. It was like SYMs? I don't know. What company was that? What company didn't make it, right? It looked like this kind of symbol. They were pretty nice motorbikes, but some of them were like, 100 million compared to like, your Hondas and whatnot. So, I don't know if these are not it. These are like motorbike. What is that guy doing? I guess I could say scooter, people, 150cc. No. Anyway, these classic bikes were very popular. Not these off-road monsters. What? These are, maybe this one? No. Phantom? No. Eagle? No. No, they were the ones after the D-Lons. You guys were too young. When I first got here, the most popular motorbike was a D-Lon, and then it became these kind of At bikes. They were called At, and then we had some Yamahas that were popular for a while. And now we have the SHs. If you want to be a superstar, you have an SH. But most bikes are good enough now that most people don't really care about them so much, so it's not such a big deal. Anyway, fashion was important, and people would not follow the helmet law. They were not interested. By the third try, there was a huge public awareness campaign using newspapers, billboards, and posters, and advertisements that basically, like cigarette advertisements, the warnings on cigarette labels, showed statistics. They showed very dramatic situations of people who lived well, and then they couldn't, their brain got smashed, and then they had to be fed by their family members, and were a liability for society and for their family, and kind of scared people into thinking, wow, yeah, it's really bad what happens. And the third time it actually worked, so it took a while for people to get used to it. At first they tried to just introduce the change, tell everybody they have to change. And you can see that there is even resistance on, people want to logically understand what's happening. I mean, I think a helmet is easy to explain. Maybe wearing a mask is not always easy to explain. In the US, I would say yes, you should be able to explain quite easily that you should wear a mask because we don't know who has it. It's totally up in the air. Whereas in Vietnam, to me, it's like, no, we know who has it. Basically, anywhere that has an infection around that area, yeah, they should wear masks. But the places where there are no infections, they don't need to waste masks that could be used by someone else. Just my opinion. But you have to explain that to people, and then one way they did it is they, made people like shame each other and say, you're a bad person because you're not wearing a mask in your own house or whatever. And put some fear into them, and in Singapore they have very large fines for people, for example. Anyway, change is that was worth researching. How did we actually get the helmet law to change? I'm sure there's some good articles. Anyway, change management. Prepare for the change. Consult research plan. Discuss options. And consult is probably one of the most important things. Is to consult the staff. And communicate, not communicate the change, communicate the need for the change. Just maybe, it could be based on other things. Survival, fear, belonging. Be like everyone else. Be like Team Corona, okay? So once everybody is wearing a mask and everybody's getting safer and the numbers are not going up and we feel like we're doing our part to stop COVID-19, then people are wearing a mask almost as a symbol of solidarity. It's not even about protection anymore. So they sold the change to us from belonging. Yeah, we get some kind of pride in our response, even if it wasn't related to the masks. And then, so for example, the need for change, what benefits are going to come from it? Ensure involvement. Ensure involvement. Consult all the stakeholders. Think about the ripple effects from the last lesson. Ripple effects are effects that are secondary. You have the first effect, you can see what's going to happen. We're going to add more people here or have to let people go in this department. And after that, it's going to have different effects about the department, how people work, their attitude, perhaps who's responsible for what. So then you're going to have to follow the chain of responsibility to make sure that somebody is responsible for something that somebody else used to do. So consult the staff affected so they can bring up feedback about what can be, what might go wrong. And then all the while, provide support. This is management functions, right? We've got planning and organizing. Also also, organizing is about getting the resources together, so provide support, information, training, resources, letting the staff have their say, or at least their vent. Vent means to complain a bit. And then leadership is important. So almost all the management functions here, we have planning, organizing, or organizing resources. Of course, after the helmet law is passed, you want to see how effective it is, so there's control. And there's leadership, which is convincing people to go along with the change. So all of the management functions, P, O, L, C, are used in change management. Then we get to this guy, Carl Leuven, loving it, I'm loving it. Oh my God, how did I say that? He has stages of change. So you'll see when we get to Crazy John Connor that he has 8 levels of change. So it went from 3 to 8. Leuven's theory is more simplified, although there are some parts that you could say are sub-stages within his 3 stages of change. I will run video first and just let you guys relax from my voice for a minute, then I'll go over it and then we'll be good.
Changing and refreezing. The model represents a very simple and practical model for understanding the change process. For Leuven, the process of change entails creating the perception that a change is needed, then moving towards the new desired level of behavior, and finally solidifying that new behavior as the norm. The model is still very widely used and serves as a basis for many modern change models. Before you can cook a meal that has been frozen, you need to defrost or thaw it out. The same can be said of change. Before a change can be implemented, it must go through the initial step of unfreezing. Because many people will naturally resist change, the goal during the unfreezing stage is to create an awareness of how the status quo, or current level of acceptability, is hindering the organization in some way. Old behaviors, ways of thinking, processes, people, and organizational structures must all be carefully examined to show employees how necessary a change is for the organization to create or maintain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Communication is especially important during the unfreezing stage so that employees can become informed about the imminent change, the logic behind it, and how it will benefit each employee. The idea is that the more we know about a change and the more we feel it is necessary and urgent, the more motivated we are to accept the change. Now that the people are unfrozen, they can begin to move. Leuven recognized that change is a process where the organization must transition or move into this new state of being. This changing step, also referred to as transitioning or moving, is marked by the implementation of the change. This is when the change becomes real. It's also, consequently, the time that most people struggle with the new reality. It is a time marked with uncertainty and fear, making it the hardest step to overcome. During the changing step, people begin to learn the new behaviors, processes, and ways of thinking. The more prepared they are for this step, the easier it is to complete. For this reason, education, communication, support, and time are critical for employees as they become familiar with the change. Again, change is a process that must be carefully planned and executed. Throughout this process, employees should be reminded of the reasons for the change and how it will benefit them once fully implemented. Leuven called the final stage of his change model freezing, but many refer to it as refreezing to symbolize the act of reinforcing, stabilizing, and solidifying the new state after the change. The changes made to the organizational processes, goals, structure, offering, or people are accepted and refrozen as the new norm or status quo. Leuven found the refreezing step to be especially important to ensure that people do not revert back to their old ways of thinking or doing prior to the implementation of the change. Efforts must be made to guarantee the change is not lost. Rather, it needs to be cemented into the organization's culture and maintained as the acceptable way of thinking or doing. Positive rewards and acknowledgement of individualized efforts are often used to reinforce the new state because it is believed that positively reinforced behavior will likely to be repeated. Some argue that the refreezing step is outdated in contemporary business due to the continuous need for change. They find it unnecessary to spend time freezing a new state when chances are that it will need to be reevaluated and possibly changed again in the immediate future. However, as I previously mentioned, without the refreezing step, there is a high chance that people will revert back to the old ways of doing. Taking one step forward and 2 steps back can be a common theme when organizations overlook the refreezing step in anticipation for future change. To better understand Lewin's change model, let's take a look at the following example. Kitty Chiropractic has decided to switch from using handwritten medical records to electronic ones. All of the staff at Kitty have always relied on handwritten medical records when performing their jobs and have expressed concerns about switching to the new electronic format. However, Kitty management believes that making the switch to electronic records will increase efficiency and reduce the amount of time that it takes to record patient information. First, Kitty management will have to spend time unfreezing the employee's belief that the old way of recording patient records is adequate. The management team will need to communicate the perceived benefits of the new electronic method, making sure to demonstrate how the pros outweigh the cons. The staff will need to understand how much more efficient the new method of electronic recording will be in comparison to the old handwritten process. Next, Kitty management will need to transition into the changing stage by implementing the new electronic recording system. This will mark a time of uncertainty in the Kitty staff, making it necessary for the management team to offer training and support as the employees become familiar with the new electronic system. Finally, Kitty management will need to refreeze the new method of recording into the organization's culture, making certain that the staff recognizes the electronic system as the new norm and the manner in which they will record patient information going forward. The management team should also recognize the efforts made by the staff members to learn and use the new system by offering them some sort of reward and praise.
Okay, so that gives you an idea. Putting a new system in place, such as Zoom classrooms, it takes a while to get used to what's happening, or even how to do it, or maybe not even get good at it at any point. But the idea is that that you gotta bring the change. You've got to reinforce the change after after it happens, in order to maintain it, or else things could drift back into where they were before. So those are Lewin's 3 steps of change. My book is hard to read. Prepare employees for the process of change. I'll just go on to page 71. It is understandable that people have worked at a job and feel comfortable and have their sense of themselves and their identity linked to the work that they do. If they find out that some jobs or processes and the work culture has changed or it's changing, they can feel anxious about the future. Unfreezing is the process to help people to feel comfortable about being unstuck in the old ways. Freeing themselves from the old and embracing the vision of the new. Now sometimes that can be just a simple thing like if we don't change, business will close and everyone will lose their jobs. That's a way that companies sometimes threaten workers to make them change in ways that they might not want. Automating systems, like this idea here about the new online system. Probably, instead of the paper system, it probably works better, but you can imagine some employees might feel like, this is an extra step, and it doesn't really provide a benefit. It might help with accounting. There might be parts of the company that says, wait, this will really help us, and some parts of the company that it won't really help, so at least you can share with your employees which parts of the organization feel like they will be most helped, and that way the employees can feel like at least they're helping other people. Like ice, ideas and expectations can be hard to move until they unfreeze and become fluid. I don't know, I've never shipped ice. I think it's easier to carry ice than water. You don't need to put the ice into a cup, you need to put water into a cup. Anyway, what am I saying? Unfreezing occurs through communicating the purpose of the change, having a clear plan, and being open and honest. If you lie, they're not going to believe you again about the role of employees and the impact on their working life. Yes, it's going to be more work for 2 months, but then after that it should be less work. Yes, some people are going to lose their jobs. I mean, if you're not honest about it, then people, they're not going to believe in the change. The change team and management must convince employees that there are costs and risks of not changing, which is why I like that other video where we had those weird cartoon guys arguing about mermaids and climbing a mountain. There are costs and risks of not changing and benefits and opportunities created by the change. So I think that's actually a very, it's a good way to look at it, right? Costs and risks. So every employee realizes there's costs and risks and benefits and opportunities. This stage involves lots of leadership, lots of staff meetings, lots of stakeholder involvement, small group workshops, as we saw before. He said groups are more important, or one of Lewin's theories is that groups of workers are more important than individual workers or the whole organization. You have to look at each maybe unit and how they think together as a group about their jobs. And the distribution of information verbally and then following up in writing and by email. So not just sending emails, hey, guess what, change, check it out, yo, don't call me, I'm not going to answer your calls, just see the change. Employee feedback is sought to try to alleviate concerns. Now when we get to Cotter, of course, he's like, if there's a no-no, get them out of the way. Once the preparation for the unfreezing step is completed, then the implementation of the policy. So that means that there has to be training. We saw in this case with the photocopier, people felt a little bit uncomfortable about how they were going to deal with this.
Urgent.
Once they learned how the new photocopier works, photocopiers are stressful. It's a very good example. There are some photocopiers that I saw that can do scans now, so I learned how to do scans on a photocopier, and I don't have to go to the scan store anymore, which is good. Especially when I'm trying to share IELTS documents in Zoom. So you can make it fun, right? You can make the change a learning experience. It takes time and it costs money again. The change plan is implemented and new policy systems and processes are introduced. For example, a new computer network, new employee incentives, so creating competition in the workplace maybe, or bringing staff from a merger or acquisition, new staff. Communication is vital, as well as linking employee rewards and recognition to the new ways of doing business. So giving people credit, Leuven talked about that a little bit, giving people some credit for being able to learn and to train up on the new system. Refreeze! is about formalizing the new policies. So if you're going to use the example from the photocopy, or not photocopy machine, actually the one that they talked about was the records, the record keeping. If you were going to make the records electronic, a symbolic refreezing moment would be to throw away the paper, the paper documents, to show that we're not using them anymore, and to take them out of the process that they're not used. So first we have to take everything that was the old data, put it into the new system, and then refreeze by throwing away the paper versions. This stage is about formalizing the new policies, systems, and processes. It may take time for employees to become comfortable with the new ways of doing their jobs and to learn new routines and processes like this kind of video. Management needs to keep communicating, celebrating successes, and rewarding commitment to the new organization to keep people motivated and committed and not fall back into the old ways, is what Leuven would say. Stabilizing the change. Stabilizing. Change management can be unsuccessful. There may be resistance to change because employees fear they will lose their jobs, or maybe their power, authority. They may not be convinced that change is even necessary. The main factors of unsuccessful change are, you can imagine if you close your eyes, lack of communication about the change, poor planning. They didn't make the steps of the change. Some changes can happen incrementally and slowly, and it's okay. And some changes need to be done quickly and decisively. So if the plan is not correct, then that would be a failure. Lack of skills and experience on the change team. So if no managers have ever been through a big change before, how are they going to be able to, they have to really keep the vision, right, of what it is. And so I think that goes to number 3, poor leadership by the change agents, meaning that in this case, poor leadership means that it's unclear what's the goal. So you need to have a team that can do the change, and you also need a belief about the change and leadership. Finally, lack of coordination between managers. So if there are managers that are thinking differently from other managers, that might create chaos in the change. Leuven, 3 steps. He also had a secondary theory, which was called force field analysis. And I think that the force field analysis is useful as a thinking tool about the need for change. This is not after you've started the change. This is whether or not you should change. So you can do this in your personal life. You can do this in your business, for example. Successful change leads on all employees believing in the goals and being committed to building a new organization, or giving up and realizing that there's no way to stop it. Without frequent communication, good leadership, and a clear plan, employees will not feel confident. Leuven's force field analysis. It looks totally scientific. Look, there's a proposal in the middle, and then you have these awesome forces. Forces, use the force. The force for change. No, there's forces against change too. It's the dark side and the light side. Fighting about proposal X. So, when you do a force field analysis, you label the things that are influencing your change, usually some kind of pest factor, or your competition, perhaps an environmental, operational factor, or cost savings. I guess it could be internal. What is driving the change? So what are the forces that are pushing for the change? And then, of course, you have the forces against the change. And one of them could be the cost of the change. So you make a list. And you make a list for change, and you make a list against change. And when you make those lists, you are going to then evaluate the importance in this very kind of gray and unclear way. Evaluate the importance of those changes or there's forces, so you maybe give them a number like 4, 3, 2, 1 for how much and how important they are. When you can see the forces for and against change, you can amplify the ones, make it bigger, the ones that are the most important forces, and you can try to find ways to solve what are the biggest forces against change and try to make the equation a little bit easier, seeing as you're matching the totals of both. There's a short video here about this, and then I'll summarize it afterwards. Should have more remote control.
Video, we're going to take a look at an important theoretical model that's really useful when you're answering questions on change management, and it's called Lewin's model of force field analysis.
I have seen this on exams. They've asked students to make a force field analysis. You just have to make up your own weight, you know. You have to think of a situation, try to imagine what's happening behind it. They usually give you a few clues to follow, and then you have to explain why the change would be good or bad, or what forces need to be emphasized or diminished in order to make the change work. It's not that hard, but you have to use, you have to speculate a little bit.
The essential element of the force field analysis model looks at the balance between the forces that are pushing or driving for change in a business or organisation and the restraining forces, the forces that are in some ways perhaps being stubborn, trying to resist the change that is being looked for. So force field analysis tries to assess the balance between these two different driving and resisting forces. Here he is, the guy who came up with the model some time ago. Lewin was an American social psychologist who had a strong interest in organisational behaviour, and in particular his research around how businesses were able to successfully adapt and be flexible to their rapidly changing external environment. Looking at examples of businesses that succeeded in implementing change compared with those who found themselves in difficulties for being resistant to change and inflexible. And his models are really simple one to understand. You don't need lots of detail. The key to understand is to remember there's two parts to the force field. The parts on the left are those forces which are pushing for change, what are known as the driving forces. And we'll have a look at a few of those in a minute. Against those forces were those which resist change, what are called restraining forces. So you can see the model is essentially a balance between the forces on the left pushing in, are they stronger or weaker than the forces on the right? Now, when we think about change, of course there are going to be a variety of different forces on both sides. And the basic idea of Lewin's model is to try in some way to weight or score those forces. For example,
that's the part that's kind of like, you know, would everybody weight or score those equally? It's a little bit, you know, it's more of a thinking tool. It's not scientific at all.
You might have three forces on the left pushing for change. Maybe one scored 5, in other words, a strong force. Maybe one was scored 3 and one was scored 1. Added together, that would be 9. Against them, the forces of resistance, maybe 3 forces, but added together only equaling 7. So in this situation, Lewin would say that the forces for change are greater than the forces resisting change, and therefore change is possible. So the key output from the model is to try to see what the difference is between the two forces. If they are in equilibrium, there'll be no change. However, if it's possible to find a way of making the driving force greater than the restraining force, then change and change management programs are more likely to succeed. And of course, the key outcome in that is that what management have to do is to try to reduce the forces that are resisting change. Now, of course, on the left-hand side of the model, you can imagine lots of different factors within any business that may be pushing for change. Internal forces that are within the control of the business might include a desire amongst the management and the board or the shareholders for much higher financial returns, perhaps higher profits or better cash flow. It could well be that there's a perceived lack of innovation or poor efficiency and productivity in the business, which is causing management to push for significant change. And of course, it can also be driven by the need to change the organisational culture, perhaps through new leadership. But don't forget, change can also be driven by the external environment, so external forces which are outside of the control of the business. For example, something within the market, maybe a change in the way that consumers demand the product, certainly the actions of the competition, and of course, in our classic pestle model, we'll be looking for changes in things like political, economic, legislative, social and technological areas. So there are lots of factors and forces that drive change in business, but of course, as we know, in many businesses and organisations, change is resisted. Employees, staff, customers, other stakeholders in the business are stubborn. And of course, a degree of resistance to any kind of change is perfectly normal, since change can be stressful for those involved, nearly always is, and it certainly has a destructive impact on an organisation. And of course, it's right that change is challenged, particularly if the proposed change is inappropriate for the business. However, of course, it's also true that change is often the factor that is the impediment that slows the achievement of what the business or organisation is trying to achieve, what's known as the organisational or corporate objectives. Kotler and Schlesinger identified a useful series of factors that explain why change is resisted, including factors such as poor communications. For example, staff or employees simply not understanding the nature of the changes required, perhaps not understanding the problems that the business faces. Of course, self-interest comes into play, doesn't it? If you've got a role, maybe a managerial role in a business where the change may result in that job being lost, you've clearly got an interest in resisting. But it could also just simply be the uncertainty, the disagreement and the uncertainty about whether change is required and what's the best way to achieve it. So this is where the force field analysis model comes in really useful to help set the scene for determining whether a change management program is possible. And for you guys, all you really need to remember, as I say, is the forces for change, are they greater than or less than the forces resisting change? Let's just take a minute just to have a quick look at a simple example, a really good example, which was the change that has...
Change at the Royal Mail? What are they going to change?
Taking place at the UK's Royal Mail. Now, when Moya Green was appointed as CEO back in 2010, I think it was, she faced some significant challenges both in the internal and external environment. There were lots of forces pushing for change. The government had recently deregulated the parcels market, bringing lots more competition into the market. There was also a political desire to achieve the privatisation of the Royal Mail once it had been turned around. And part of the reason for this was that the Royal Mail, or certain parts of it, were heavily loss-making, so there was a strong financial incentive to achieve a significant change in financial performance. But what Moya Green had also to do was to identify the forces that would be resisting any proposed operational, cultural, organisational change.
Union!
Not the least being an industry that was, to some extent still is, heavily
That would be my first guess every time.
with a culture that was pretty ingrained, with many people within the Royal Mail having worked there for a long time, but also significant uncertainty amongst the workforce as to what change would mean, having it being explained that it almost inevitably result in a significant number of job losses, particularly as a result of the automation process that Moya Green was trying to push through. Now, as you look at the Royal Mail case study, you'll soon see that Moya Green was, over the long term, over a number of years, highly successful in reducing the forces resisting change and allowing the forces for change to take effect, and therefore making her case as leader one of the most interesting and certainly one of the best examples of how new leadership can effect significant change. But it's a great example of the force field analysis model in action.
Well, he didn't put numbers on that stuff. I would have liked to have seen the numbers. It's a short example. I'll offer another example next class, but I'm just introducing the idea today. So yeah, let me just go through a couple of the paragraphs, and then I'll go over again at the beginning of next lesson before we talk about John Connor. I'm on page 72. For change management to be successful, employees must be convinced that the forces for change. Employees gonna look at this document? Yeah, I think it's mostly management. Are stronger than the forces against change. Force field analysis is a method to analyze and compare the forces of change. It is a tool, not a scientific tool, that can be used as part of the unfreezing stage to help employees understand the need for change. This is early in the process. To organize thinking, this template is used in a meeting or in a brainstorming session. The template is used to record forces that people believe support and those that create resistance to change. This technique, nominal, meaning number, is used in the analysis. For example, ideas for forces are brainstormed and recorded, then the group will decide, usually as a group together, which forces are the most important, and then rated in terms of their performance. The rating could be out of 5 or 10. The highest rating means the more impact the force has on the change. So we'll look at an example of this later, next video, probably tomorrow. And I think year 12 will have class next week. I don't know if year 9 will. I pray that we do. If we do, we're going to have a quiz at the end of the week. It's going to help solidify our first task. And then we're going to have a few more tests too. So it's going to get kind of hairy. I'm trying to get information that I can use to help you ASAP. Everybody have a great day.